Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Candidates Night 2020. Tonight's event is sponsored by the Rockland Democratic and Republican Town Committees and in cooperation with WRPS. My name is John Ward. I'm chairman of the Rockland Democratic Town Committee. The co-moderator for tonight's event is Jared Valanzola, chairman of the Rockland Republican Town Committee. I want to thank David Cable Murphy of WRPS for his invaluable assistance in setting up this program. Tonight's event is being brought to you in two parts. Part one, you will hear from three candidates for Plymouth County Commissioner. There are two open positions. The two candidates who receive the most votes will win. The candidates are Greg Hanley, Jack Riordan, and Jared Valanzola. In part two, you will hear from the two candidates for state representative for the 5th Plymouth District. The candidates are incumbent David DeCoste and challenger Emmanuel Dockter. Before we start the program, I have a message concerning your voting options from Town Clerk Donna Shorthall. There are three options for voters in the town of Rockland. First is the mail-in ballot. You can obtain a mail-in ballot by sending a letter of request to the town clerk at 242 Union Street. The last day to request a mail-in ballot is Wednesday, October 28th. The town clerk's office just received a mail-in ballot from the Commonwealth. If you requested a mail-in ballot, you will start receiving them this week. Mail-in ballots returned by mail have to be postmarked by Tuesday, November 3rd, and received no later than 5 p.m. on November 6th. You can return your mail-in ballot to the Town Hall drop box at the left of the front door of the Town Hall until 8 p.m. Tuesday, November 3rd. If you want to change from a mail-in ballot to vote at the polls on Election Day, you will be required to sign an affidavit that you did not vote twice. If you vote by mail and at the polls, your votes will be rejected and not counted. If you're going to vote with a mail-in ballot, mail in your vote as soon as possible. Do not wait until the last minute. The second option is early voting. Early voting will take place every day at the Town Hall starting Saturday, October 17th to Friday, October 30th. Check the Town Hall website homepage bulletin board for the hours. Click on the page with the flag and the eagle that is labeled Updates for the November election. And the third option is regular voting, which will take place on Tuesday, November 3rd. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And I want to thank the town clerk, Donna Shorthall, and her staff, Liza Landy and Christine Campanile, for the information that they have provided this evening. Thank you. So at this point, we can move to the candidates for Plymouth County Commissioner. The order of speakers was chosen by ballot, or lot, and just happened to come out alphabetically. Our first speaker this evening for Plymouth County Commissioner candidate is Greg Hanley. Mr. Hanley.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you, WRPS and David Cable Murphy, for having this forum. It's great to see when both Republican and Democratic parties can come together to sponsor something like this, so thank you very much. A little over 8 years ago, I was elected as the County Commissioner for Plymouth County, and at the time, we had a $64 million deficit, and we had a structural deficit in the calendar year that I got elected of about $750,000 that I inherited from the previous administration. Over the last 8 years, we've straightened out the financial mess that the county was in, and to the point where we're in good standing. I am looking to become your Plymouth County Commissioner once again so I can fulfill my original commitment when I took office of eradicating the county's debt. Currently, that debt is around $17 million, and we're breathing a little easier, but in these tough times, it's going to be tough to try to cobble together a solution, especially because we're in the midst of the COVID pandemic. Business is not as usual, and you have to be creative in the way you stretch your dollars and you work, and still to provide a level of services that the communities that you represent can have. To that effect, I would like to say I'm very proud of the Plymouth County Commissioner's ability to distribute the CARES Act money that we applied for and received back in April. We created a program for all 27 communities to take advantage of unanticipated COVID expenses as it relates to the CARES Act. It's a reimbursement program, and to date we have distributed just over $25 million of the $90 million with about 13 applications to go. Today I had the pleasure of being with Representative DeCoste in the town of Hanover, distributing our second check of funds. We approved the third check this morning at the commissioners meeting, and we had a wonderful time with the Board of Selectmen, and they were so grateful to get money that was applied for in a 2-week turnaround and quickly apply it to the programs that they're proactively seeking for the residents of the town of Hanover. That's just one example of CARES Act money that's been distributed. We've been all across the county. The county's 1,000 square miles, and every inch of the county has been impacted, some more than others. And when you come to the shire towns of Brockton and Plymouth, those folks with the denser populations have the greater need because their cases are higher than those of the suburbs. Currently, we are in the midst of asking our member communities to assess their soft cap, and we're asking them whether or not they're going to live up to that soft cap. So in the last round of funding that we may redistribute the money for possibly to the hospitals in conjunction with anti-COVID procedures and practices and testing. So with that, I would ask you to vote for me on November 3rd. I am top of the ballot, and I thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight, Jack.
Thank you, Mr. Hanley. And our next speaker is Jack Riordan. Jack, excuse me.
Good evening. Good evening. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I want to thank the Republican and Democratic town committees of Rockland for putting this together this evening. My name is Jack Riordan. I'm running for Plymouth County Commissioner, and I'm running for a better tomorrow, a better county government. I'd like to share with you a little bit about my background and some of the proposals that I have for county government and the directions that I'd like to see county government go in the future. A little bit about my background. For the last probably 10 or 15 years, I've been raising my 2 sons as a parent and very active in Marshfield youth football and Marshfield youth sports. I was on the board of directors of Marshfield youth football for many years and their pro bono legal counsel, and I served as a football coach. I've been a practicing attorney in Plymouth County for over 30 years. During these last 30 years, I was fortunate enough to, with a group of my friends, get together and be one of the original incorporators of the Brockton Boys and Girls Club. And I served as the president of the Brockton Boys and Girls Club for many years. I also served as a lieutenant commander of the United States Navy Reserve. I served as an assistant district attorney here in Plymouth County. I also, in 2017, received the Massachusetts Bar Association Community Service Award for the Mochila Project, which was bringing backpacks and coats to children living below the poverty line in Brockton. I have a couple proposals for county government. Number 1, transparency. The county commissioners do not and have not for the last 8 years recorded audio or video of their meetings. A good principle of good government is very simple. Transparency. The meetings need to be recorded, audio and video. Number 2, code of conduct. The county commissioners should move forward with the code of conduct and revote the code of conduct, which is a very simple principle of good government. Elected officials of Plymouth County should not accept political donations from people who do business with the county. It avoids, at a minimum, the appearance of impropriety. Number 3, the county commissioners should move to preserve the woodlot in Plymouth, and that will also preserve the aquifer which underlies the woodlot in Plymouth. Aquifers don't stop at town lines, they don't stop at county lines, and the county commissioners should proceed and lead the way to be a trans-county entity to manage clean water across Plymouth County and the connecting counties. When you go to the ballot and vote in November, when November rolls around, I'd ask you to please consider giving me one of your votes for county commissioner this fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riordan. Next speaker is Jared Valanzola.
Thank you, Jack. Good evening. It's great to be on my hometown of WRPS. Thank you, Dave Murphy and Jack for the legwork here and getting this evening put together. And it's great to be back here again with you, Mr. Hanley and Mr. Riordan. My name is Jared Valanzola, and I am a lifelong resident of the town of Rockland. I am a graduate of Sacred Heart High School in Kingston, Massasoit Community College in Brockton, and Bridgewater State University in Bridgewater. So I have literally grown up and been educated all over Plymouth County, and I currently own a home here in Rockland. I serve on the planning board as its clerk. I'm on the elementary school building committee, and I currently chair the charter committee. I'm also in my 5th term as the Grand Knight of the Rockland Knights of Columbus, and was recently elected to the board of directors to reimagine Rockland. Local and county leaders such as Sheriff McDonald and DA Tim Cruz, Representative DeCoste, Muratori, Gifford, Sullivan, and D'Amelia, Mayor Bob Headland, and a whole host of selectmen, including Michael O'Laughlin and Rich Penny in Rockland, have all endorsed my candidacy. And they all have a wide range of beliefs in what county government's role should be. But they all do agree that I'm the right man for one of your 2 votes on November 3rd and starting with early voting. I have numerous goals that I would like to accomplish, and I share in common with even some of my opponents, but being a part of being a vehicle for regionalization, creating a grant writing office that can work with multiple towns to help secure quite literally billions of dollars that are available in grants at the federal and state level that our communities are not currently capable of writing because they don't have the manpower, the hours, or the capacity to do so right now. We would collaborate and get that done for folks. And also finding things, as Mr. Riordan mentioned with aquifers, but flood maps and flood zones are all done by FEMA by county. So finding a way to make sure that what is recognized on the federal level by a county on a county level, what they recognize for the county, I would really begin to tackle what it is specifically that the federal government recognizes and make sure that Plymouth County continues on its way to being the vehicle it needs to be for our communities. I have a proven track record of working together with folks. You won't find a single person I've ever served with or worked with that will tell you it's been a displeasure or that they would never want to serve with or work with me on another project again. And those are liberals or conservatives, moderates, old, young, male, female. I've served with a whole host of folks, and every single one of them would line up and tell you that it's always been an honor to serve with me, and I've always had the honor of serving with them. So again, I thank you for having us on here tonight, Jack and Dave Murphy. And again, thank you to Mr. Hanley and Mr. Riordan. And again, my name is Jared Valanzola. To learn more, you can follow me on Facebook, Jared Valanzola for Plymouth County Commissioner. You can visit votevalanzola.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Valanzola. At this time, I would like to thank Greg Hanley, Jack Riordan, and Jared Valanzola for participating in this forum. Thank you. At this point, if you want, you can.
Thank you.
Read. I appreciate it. I'm glad we could do it and help the voters decide what to do.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see. At this point, we will go to the second part of our program, which will be moderated by Jared Valanzola.
Thank you, Jack. My name is Jared Valanzola, Chairman of the Rockland Republican Town Committee. and it is our pleasure to join with our friends on the Democratic Town Committee and Jack Ward to bring you the candidates for state representative in the 5th Plymouth District, incumbent Representative David DeCoste running for re-election, and his challenger, former Hanover Selectman Emmanuel Dockter. I will quickly just go over the ground rules here for state representative. Candidates each have 2 minutes for opening statements, and then Mr. Ward and I will alternate back and forth asking questions. Each answer we ask for 1 minute. For rebuttals, we will allow for 30 seconds, and then we will do closing statements, 2 minutes each. I will keep track of it with my phone here. If I hold it up, please speed it up. We're not, folks have watched these before. We certainly don't mind you guys going, but if you start to get a little long, then we're gonna rein you in a little bit. So with that being said, I will kick it off here with the first question. And actually, Jack, did we select an order to start with? I did not bring a coin. I do not have a coin with me. We were supposed to flip a coin, I think.
We did not choose the order yet. We can do that now. You want me to toss the coin?
Yeah, maybe we can just pick a name out of the hat. That's fine.
Okay, let me do that. Hold on. Hold on. I've thrown both names into a hat. First up is David DeCoste, and we go from there.
Okay. Representative DeCoste, you're on mute.
Okay. Unmuted. First of all, Dave Murphy, WRPS and the Rockland and Hanover Democrat and Republican, the Rockland Democrat and Republican Town Committees. Thank you for sponsoring this forum. Tonight, I'm asking the voters of Hanover, Norwell, and Rockland for the opportunity to once again be your representative in the legislature. For those of you unfamiliar with my background, I was born and raised on the South Shore, and I'm a K-12 graduate of Norwell Public Schools. My family has occupied the same home for over 5 decades, and I'm familiar with our district and the people who live here. I appreciate its history and committed to its well-being. More of my background can be found on citizensfordecoste.com. Over the past 6 years, working with Governor Baker and my colleagues in the legislature, I'm happy to report that we have followed through on our promises to fully fund local aid at the highest level. We continue to fund road construction and repair this year at an annual level higher than any previous fiscal year. And we passed legislation making it tougher on drug dealers, easier on veterans, and easier on business people, in which it make it also more attractive to operate a business here. I have specifically led the fight for better conditions for foster care providers, against tolls on Route 3, and for sensible housing and water quality policy. Since the COVID breakout, we have worked to provide thorough constituent service and at the same time work with local, municipal, and county leaders and administrators to provide funding and support in a timely fashion. As your representative, I have done exactly as I promised to do, and I hope you'll vote for me, Representative David DeCoste, on Tuesday, November 3rd. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative DeCoste. Mr. Dockter.
Dave Murphy, thanks for helping set all this up on Zoom. Jack and Jared, thanks for hosting this and organizing it. Representative DeCoste, thanks for joining me here. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be a candidate for state representative for 5th Plymouth. As Representative DeCoste pointed out, that's Rockland as well as Hanover and Norwell. My wife Heidi and I live in Hanover. We're raising our 3 kids there, Abby, Henry, and Ethan. We moved this area specifically because it's a great community for families. Let me give you a bit about my background. My dad passed when I was 9 years old. My mom was left to raise me and my 5 brothers by herself. She worked 3 jobs just to put food on the table. Despite all her hard work though, we still struggled. We went through poverty and homelessness. I can say without a doubt, if it wasn't for the help of my community growing up, I would not be where I am today. When I was 17, I joined the United States Marine Corps in the infantry. My time in the Marines gave me a strong work ethic. It helped me appreciate the value of working for something greater than yourself. After the Marines, I was fortunate to put myself through college and law school with help from the GI Bill. Heidi and I were looking to find a great place to raise our family, and we found that here. Since then, I've been committed fully to our community. I built a small business in Norwell. In Hanover, I've been the chair of the Board of Selectmen, vice chair of the Advisory Committee, and chair of the Master Plan Committee. I repeatedly hear residents of Rockland, Hanover, and Norwell telling me how sick they are of political partisanship. It's ripping our country apart. In the Marines, I didn't care about the political party of the guy standing next to me. I cared that we were working together. That was my approach to government as Hanover Selectman, and that will be how I approach the job of state rep. I believe our towns can do better. I believe the role of state rep can be so much more than it's been over the last 6 years. I'll focus on economic recovery and much needed support for our local small businesses. I'll deliver more state funding and resources for our towns and the programs and projects that need them. And I really appreciate you again hosting me here tonight. Look forward to talking about what I feel are very different approaches to the job of state rep. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. That's Emmanuel Dockter running for state representative. So I will kick off the questions, and then Jack Ward and I will go back and forth. So obviously, perhaps the biggest issue right now, do you think the response to COVID-19 has been handled properly at the federal and state level? I will start with you, Mr. Dockter, 1 minute.
Thanks, Jared. You know, this pandemic has devastated so many families in Massachusetts and especially this area. We've all been affected, whether it's the loss of a loved one, the loss of economic security through your job or your business, even something simple like making sure that we can take our kids to school. I'm a father. My kids are in public schools. I'm trying to balance remote learning, managing my kids' Zoom classes. At the same time, I'm trying to work and make a living to support my family. It's a real challenge. Frankly, I don't think the federal response has been helpful in addressing this. There's been a complete lack of leadership federally. There's been no consistent message or guidance at all. And I should say, it's not just that the guidance changes day to day, it's sometimes changing hour to hour, minute to minute. If there's any question about the federal response, just look at the recent decision to stop negotiating economic recovery measures. Some people just don't get it. If we do not get financial support from the federal government, our local small business economy will not make it. I'll just say quickly on the state level, I think we've done a lot better job than most. I see at the state level 3 goals for government: keeping our residents safe, keeping our local and regional economies viable, and finding ways for our kids to get back to school safely. I think the Massachusetts has done a much better job at the first goal. The second 2 goals, I think we have room for improvement. Looking at some of the businesses that have been able to open, laser tag, trampoline parks, and this other stuff, it's frustrating that we haven't been able to do the same thing with schools. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Representative DeCoste.
Well, you asked about the responses from the federal and state government, and I think there are pluses and minuses with both. I can tell you that my office has been very busy working on both unemployment at the federal and state level, and we've done a good job in executing. Certainly the money that has come through COVID relief has been tremendous, and in both the federal and the state level, they have pushed a great deal of funding down, and through the PPP program have been very good, I think, in making sure that a number of companies that may not have made it, or at least up till now, solvent and moving forward. As a state representative, we work primarily through the local level, the state and the counties, and I will give a tremendous amount of credit to Plymouth County that stepped forward and took the bull by the horns in terms of COVID relief. And their distribution of COVID relief has been very, very good. I think that that is also in large measure true of our state agencies that have done a tremendous job in administering at unprecedented levels the relief, whether it be, again, our Department of Employment Security or Mass Health. They are doing a terrific job. So in terms of the federal and state level, mixed reviews, but I would say in both cases it's positive, and I think they are both moving forward.
Thank you, Rep. DeCoste. Jack Ward for the next question.
At this point, we'll alternate. Mr. Dockter, The next question is, do you support a so-called red flag gun law that would allow family members to petition the courts to issue an extreme risk protection order that would suspend a person's license to carry a firearm if they are deemed mentally unstable or dangerous?
Who's starting? Are we alternating? Who's starting?
Yeah, we can have Rep. DeCoste go first for
Okay.
that one.
No, that bill had a number of problems to include. In fact, that it had a provision in it that actually made it easier to get guns. It was not a police priority, and I didn't support it again because the ability of an individual who had their weapons taken away to recover those weapons was not adequate. So I voted against that bill, and will continue to work with police organizations toward, I think, real reforms in terms of making communities safer, and that is by taking criminals off the streets and keeping them off the streets. I think our gun laws are working fine right now, and the red flags laws would have made it much more difficult in some cases to administer those laws.
Mr. Dockter, would you like me to read the question again?
No, it's okay. Thanks, Jack. You know, Dave, I think this is a point where we disagree. I would say we disagree pretty strongly. The red flag law was passed overwhelmingly through legislature, including by a majority of the Republican representatives. In fact, I believe you were only one of 14 who voted against the law. You know, it's important to understand what the law does and what the law doesn't do. This law does not undermine your Second Amendment rights. It doesn't limit your ability to protect your phone, your home, and your family. What it does do is it provides emergency protection with judicial oversight to make sure that someone who's mentally unstable and dangerous doesn't have access to a firearm. This law prevents school shootings, keeps our families safe, our law enforcement responders safe, and frankly, those who might be suicidal. I was in the infantry and the Marines. I understand the immense responsibility of owning a firearm. And speaking with people in this community, I have not found a single responsible gun owner who believes that anybody who is seriously dangerous and mentally unstable should have access to a firearm. I think this is an issue just that we disagree on.
Thank you, Mr. Dockter. Okay. Next question, of course, COVID-19 has been dominating a lot of headlines, but one thing that we've been combating for several years has been the opioid epidemic. We'll start with you, Mr. Dockter. What do you propose to combat drug abuse and tackle the ongoing opioid epidemic?
Thanks, Jared, and I appreciate the question because during this pandemic, a lot of people aren't talking about the epidemic of opioids. And you know, the first thing we need to acknowledge when we talk about the opioid crisis is that this affects families. You know, this crisis isn't just about the user, it's about their entire family. For those out there who have had this touch your family, you know the personal heartache that you've gone through, going through the endless cycle, having a member of your family use, come clean, use again, and on and on. So when we're talking about providing support in this crisis, I think we need to talk about providing support for the entire family, not just the single user and not just in an emergency. So with this, I want to call out a very successful program that I know our police chiefs locally are very involved in, the Project Outreach Program with Plymouth County. This program coordinates between the police departments throughout the county. It allows for collaboration across multiple towns, because if you have someone who is using in one town, often they're not living in that town. So it's important to coordinate the efforts between the towns. We need to fund these type of programs. We also need to do a few other things. We need to better regulate sober homes. So, you know, there's some great sober homes out there, but unfortunately there are some who are focused much more on making a profit than caring for patients. So we need to provide better regulation on that. We need to provide better long-term support beyond just an initial emergency bed. We need long-term beds instead of just the initial. We need to aggressively prosecute fentanyl traffickers, aggressively. And I appreciate that there's been two very substantive legislations passed unanimously in the past. We need to do more than that because it is changing and evolving. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dockter. Representative DeCoste, same question.
Well, at the local level, as far as being, you know, in terms of serving the legislature, we have taken our lead from the police, and that basically involves treatment for users and stricter prosecution for dealers. And we have enacted a number of legislation, again, in coordination with local law enforcement, DAs, and county sheriffs, in terms of the ability of state and local police to coordinate and to work against local drug dealer and dealer rings. We've made it tougher on foreign dealers, and we have made it priorities in many communities for coordination, again, between federal, state, and local law enforcement to prosecute dealers at all levels, but particularly at higher trafficking levels. Locally, I would point to successful programs in the DARE programs in our schools. And toward the end of local drug opioid addiction, I have sponsored, since I was elected, 4, and I think we'd probably be on 5 if it weren't for the COVID epidemic, 4 local forums, all taking place in Hanover, where we brought local experts in terms of opioid addiction, to include police chiefs, in to speak about what programs are available and what benefits in terms of helping people get off and stay off drugs are usable. So that's what we are doing.
Great. Thank you, Representative DeCoste. Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Jared. This will be a question for Mr. DeCoste. Should state aid be increased to the cities and towns?
Yes. Is this just a yes or no answer, or would you like more?
Whatever you prefer.
Well, the Chapter 70 and Chapter 90 should be increased. You know, we're still working out how tough the economic recovery and the damage in terms of the tax revenues are coming in. We're taking a look at that, but my highest priority is to maintain Chapter 70 funds at or above where they are. And if that means, by the way, eliminating earmarks and drawing back in other types of state spending, I support that 100%. But in terms of local aid, that is my highest priority as a legislature. And I would point out that each year the GOP offers an amendment basically to take any revenues over and above the budget and just divide them out by the Chapter 74 formula, rather than have another series of earmarks.
Thank you, Mr. DeCoste. Mr. Dockter.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. And I can answer this one word too. Absolutely, state aid should be increased. But Dave, when you talk about earmarks, I think that state aid is not just Chapter 70 and Chapter 90. State aid includes any funds as a rep that you can bring back to help our local towns. So absolutely, that includes earmarks. That includes grants. That includes anything that we can bring back as a rep to help locally. In Hanover, we were able to avoid wide layoffs this year, but next year it's going to be much more challenging. It's going to be really difficult. So, I want to point out that this issue, more than anything else, is the reason why I'm running right now. Dave, over the last 6 years while you were rep, I've been on the advisory committee in Hanover and then on the board of selectmen. I've dug through all of our budgets line by line. I know other reps and what they're bringing back for money for their towns. And respectfully, Dave, on this issue, I think you've come up short. I appreciate your view on earmarks and your dislike for them, but I think that if everyone else is doing earmarks, we need to be bringing back earmarks as well. And I think that the real challenge here is that we view the role of state rep a little bit differently. I will be laser focused on helping our 3 towns. And primarily that means bringing back these funds and state resources. If you want to support the Rockland Police, bring back dedicated source of funding for their training, dedicated funding for the K-9 program. Right now they have to do fundraising to fund the K-9 program. If you want to support the fire department, bring back funding to modernize and expand the fire station. If you want to support the highway department, develop and bring back grants for underground infrastructure like sewer, water, and drainage. At the end of the day, I think this is the most important thing that a rep should be working on to bring back and support our towns. Thanks.
Representative DeCoste, you were mentioned by name. Do you want to rebut for 30 seconds?
Well, we've had a number of grants, and I can tell you that we've had, for instance, a Complete Streets grant that we work quite capably on. As a matter of fact, if you go on to where Selectman Michael Laughlin, chair of the board, endorses me, he speaks specifically about the grant money we brought to East Water and Liberty Street to fix the intersection there. We've made strides in terms of getting $1.5 million sequestered into the bond bill, which we are working on, and for bipartisan nature. We've had the first 2 earmarks that we have always gotten addressed specific ELL and SPED needs in the Rockland Public Schools, which are kind of unique to the district. So we've had a number of grants and programs that we brought in, and we'll continue to work for a myriad of different programs in terms of what we will work through.
Mr. Dockter, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, Dave, but I think if you look at the numbers are clear. And other reps are bringing back other resources. And I think that if we just look at the numbers, it's black and white, it's very clear over the last 6 years.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dockter. Next question, climate change, certainly always on the forefront of folks' minds. We'll start with you, Mr. Dockter. What are your views on climate change?
Thanks. You know, I want to start with saying that my decision-making on all issues, not just this, is based on facts, data, and science. And I think climate change is real. It's irrefutable. There's no question about that. While none of our 3 communities are oceanfront, our entire regional economy is directly tied together, and it includes the oceanfront communities. If a major storm hits any of our coastal neighbors, it's going to affect all of us. I'm the only candidate here who during this campaign has been speaking about environmental concerns. And I'm not just talking about climate change and sea level rise. When I'm talking about environmental issues in Massachusetts and the South Shore, I'm talking about being a leader in the new economic sector that's happening. This is about creating jobs. It's much more than just protecting the environment. It's also protecting the entire economy here locally. If we're not in the forefront, these jobs are going somewhere else. I have an extensive plan on my website, and please, I welcome anyone to take a look at that. It's votedockter.com. I want to highlight 3 focuses, which is, again, creating jobs. Water infrastructure in our 3 towns is an issue, and then especially in Hanover, the Hanover fireworks site. We need to do a lot better job of bringing back resources for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dockter. Representative DeCoste, same question.
Well, you asked about climate change and what the state is doing about it, and we passed a number of infrastructure bills directly addressing many of these changes. For instance, when a representative gets a seawall in Emmanuel, I think that's probably the delta that you're seeing in terms of earmarks coming back. But we all want, for instance, the Fourth Cliff and Marshfield to stay in. I really don't care whether it appears on another representative's docket of earmarks or money brought back to the district, but we're all working toward that end. And we have passed a number of infrastructure bills addressing everything from small bridges and culverts all the way to flood controls. And so the state is doing very well on that. As regard environmental issues locally, I have been the legislature's primary point of contact for the North River Commission. Emmanuel, I don't ever remember seeing you there, but we have been to every meeting, and I work directly with the individuals who are there. In Hanover's case, I work directly with Mr. Leahy. I sat down last week with 2 individuals of the North River Watershed Association, the concerned citizens along the North River, and also members of the North River Commission, to hammer out policies regarding, number 1, funding, and number 2, strategy going forward to protect the North River. So to say that you're the only candidate who's talked about the environment is just wrong.
Mr. Dockter, would you like to respond for 30 seconds?
Yeah, just to be clear, Dave, when I'm talking about the funds other reps are bringing back, I'm not talking about the funding for seawall. Again, the numbers are black and white. And I've been working closely with Samantha on the North and South River Watershed Association issues. I was on the Board of Selectmen. We were addressing that, and we're addressing how we're going to be addressing the fireworks cleanup along with the watershed entire there. So I haven't seen you at those meetings either, Dave. So I'm wondering which meetings exactly you're talking about.
Rep DeCoste, 30 seconds.
Well, we coordinate for the fireworks through the town manager. So in terms of in the town, and of course the town Board of Selectmen chairs, which the people I coordinate with. In terms of the fireworks specifically, the fireworks didn't move in terms of funding until I personally walked up a Freedom of Information Act to the Attorney General's office. And until then, we had no funding issue. And we didn't even know how much was left in the funds. So the fireworks did not get moved until at the time myself, Troy Clarkson, with some help with some other individuals, got money from the state. And the genesis of that was actually addressing the lack of funding from the Attorney General's office.
Jared, can I just quickly on fireworks?
Sure.
Sure. Just really quickly, Dave, while I was on the Board of Selectmen, John Barry and before him, Brian Barthelmess were really the point of contact for the town to address the issue. And Selectman Barry specifically told me, Dave, that you have said to him no less than 5 times that you're going to bring down the director, the head of the DEP, down there to the fireworks to actually make a difference, actually get some results there. And you have not done that, and you have not followed up, and you haven't given explanation. When there was a walk of the site by the congressman and by other officials, we had expected you were going to come. You weren't able to come and do that. So I would say as a fireworks site, again, I think the data is very clear as to what has happened and what has not happened.
Okay. Now, Rutherford's final word, and then we will move on to the next.
As regards the walk of the site, that's simple. I had a committee meeting at the time, so I was at a, I believe it was a Veterans Affairs Committee, but I had a committee meeting I didn't attend, so I had a conflict, and I never missed committee meetings. As regards the site, I mean, the information is clear. The only time we had the ability to walk to get funding was when I personally walked up a Freedom of Information request to the Attorney General, and then things began moving. And at the time, my primary point of contact was Troy Clarkson during that time, and I worked with Troy quite closely on those issues.
Okay, thank you, Representative Host. Jack Ward, next question.
And this time we'll start with Mr. DeCoste.
Yes.
Who are you voting for in the presidential race and why?
I'll vote the straight Republican ticket. I'll vote the straight Republican ticket for all of my candidates. And you've asked this question. We've talked before on this type of stuff. I'm a Republican. I support and although I do not support all my candidates entirely, you know that for everyone from Jeff Deal versus Elizabeth Warren, or Peter Tedeschi versus Congressman Keating, or the current slate, I think we have got the better alternative, although our candidates are not perfect.
Thank you. Mr. Dockter, same question.
Yeah, thanks. Dave, I did go back and listen to your previous debate, and that question was asked back in 2016. And I know you gave the same answer then, that it was going to be a Republican ticket and not an individual. The one thing I would point out, Dave, is that I've seen you, as you've seen me, at a lot of standouts. Whenever I see you at a standout, I see you with your sign. I see you with a Donald Trump sign. I think it's interesting that now with independent voters watching, you don't even say the president's name, when I know that you've been a very, very strong, ardent supporter of his. I've tried hard not to get involved in national politics. I don't think it's the role of a state rep to get involved in national politics. I think it's a local position, but I will say this. I'm voting for Joe Biden. Let me tell you why I'm voting. I'm voting because, as I talked above about COVID, there's been a complete lack of leadership. Dave, when you talk about the federal government response to COVID and say that all in all, it's been a good response, I completely disagree. And I think most people would completely disagree. I also am extraordinarily disheartened by the level of divisiveness that's happening in this country. And I tie a lot of that to what's happening with the federal government. But let me be clear. If I'm elected state rep, this is the last time that you're going to hear me talking about presidential politics or national politics or any of those issues. I'm here to represent our local people, not anything to do with DC, with Beacon Hill leadership or anything else. I care about the leadership here in Rockland, Hanover, and Norwell. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dockter. Mr. DeCoste, would you care to rebut?
Yeah, well, as regard to standout, that's just dishonest. We don't allow any other signs with our standouts. So when I'm standing out, or I was at Assinippie, it was only my signs there and nobody else's. Now, as regards the broader issues, I've had very little to do with President Trump, either in advocating or contributing to any of them. Candidates that I have married up with, local candidates, again, Jeff Deal and Peter Tedeschi, I would stand behind them 100%. Mr. O'Connor, who's running for both state rep and national senate, and both O'Connors are doing fine. So I don't have a great deal to advocate, but certainly when people ask me to stand up for a great candidate like Jeff Deal, who carried your town, I know you voted for Elizabeth Warren and were a great Emmanuel, you were a great Elizabeth Warren supporter. But that doesn't mean that everything she believes, to include the police being racist, accrues to you. And again, I was proud to work with a number of candidates. Donald Trump wasn't among them.
Thank you, Mr. DeCoste. Mr. Dockter, any comment?
I think the pictures are very clear, and I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Dockter. Gary.
Thank you. Let's bring it back down to Massachusetts here. Do you support free tuition for Commonwealth residents attending Massachusetts community colleges? I believe I hit mute. Mr. Doctor, you go first.
Thanks, Jared. I'm not a fan of free. I'm not a fan of saying something's just free, here you go. I think that there is something important in investing into something that you're working for. Having said that, I completely understand the importance of higher education. I understand that the cost of higher education in Massachusetts is completely outrageous. It's gotten completely out of control. I believe we need to do better funding for our higher education institutions. Dave, I did go through your voting record. I noted that you voted against $5.2 million for UMass. You voted against $750,000 for our community college programs. I think those kinds of funding priorities are important. I also think it's important for us to put in place opportunities for people to have a payback based on community service. Given my background, hard work is important. And I think you need to be able to put some hard work into what you're going to get. I don't like the idea of it just being free.
Thank you, Mr. Doctor. Representative DeCoste.
Sure. You asked in particular for community colleges, and a couple of things going on that's positive regarding that whole system. And number one, they're actually implementing new programs whereby at the high school level, individuals will be able to take college courses through community college. And I've actually sat down with the president of Massasoit Community College and discussed that. I think it's a super program. I think it will be integrated into basically being able to either graduate early from high school and matriculate directly into colleges, either earlier into your freshman year or perhaps even into sophomore year. And so those type of programs are good. Community colleges have a number of ways. For instance, we have the scholarship program for high performers out of high school. I think that works quite well. And also the National Guard and Reserve, and we are working to expand that. But right now, National Guard and Air National and Army National Guard get free tuition at those institutions, and I support that.
Thank you, Representative DeCoste. Next question from Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Jared. This will be directed to Mr. DeCoste. If you are elected, what are your priorities for the district?
Priorities for the district primarily, well, number one, school funding will be number one priority, because I am very concerned in terms of the annual funding, whether or not we're going to be able to keep up the Chapter 70 funds. So that would be number one. Number two is working with the NFIB, and I, by the way, was designated one of two small business defenders of the year, working with both the Chamber of Commerce and the National Federation of Independent Business to make sure this economy keeps going and moves in a positive direction with strategies that help business. Local priorities have to do with having to do with a number of things. In Hanover, that would include moving forward on the fireworks site cleanup, and again, working through the Hanover town manager and the chair of the Board of Selectmen there. Certainly working to make sure that the traffic situation outside the library is taken care of. We have a number of issues in Rockland regarding infrastructure and water infrastructure, and that goes for Norwell and Hanover as well. So there are a number of things, but if I had to pick one, I would tell you that school funding is probably my #1 priority, and following also, support of business and making sure the economy in the state and in the district keeps moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. DeCoste. I'll read the question again. It's for Mr. Dockter. If you are elected, what are your priorities for the district?
Thanks, Jack. For you at home, what I would say is that priorities change and they're flexible. At the end of the day, your priorities are my priorities. That's the focus that I think a state rep should be focused on. Right now, what I'm hearing from people in the district when I'm speaking with them is they're talking about economic recovery. As I was talking about earlier, I think that Massachusetts could have done a better job with our COVID response regarding our economy. 20% of all of our restaurants have permanently closed. One of the reasons I think that's happened is because Governor Baker's advisory committee that he put together on reopening the economy did not include any real small business owners. And so if you don't understand what a small business owner is going through, if you don't understand the stress that they're going through to make payroll, to make sure that people who have been with them for decades can still take care of their family and provide for their family, it's going to be hard to put the right regulations in. And when Governor Baker was announcing his different phases, I talked to business owners who learned on Monday of what the new plan was, and it was very difficult. On top of that, absolutely, is education. As I said, I have 3 children. My kids are in public schools. It is a real challenge for a family that has 2 working parents to still be able to work and provide for your family while at the same time having to do homeschooling, remote schooling, and all that. We should have done a better job here in Massachusetts to make sure that our schools could open. And we need to do a better job going forward with better planning and advanced guidance.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Dockter. Okay. Next up, real easy one. Why are you the best candidate for this position? And we'll start with you, Mr. Dockter.
Thanks, Jared. I think the first question about that is what the position is. And my view of the position is that it is not political. This is not about political parties. This isn't about political leadership. I view the state rep position as the primary contact between government for the 3 local towns, for residents in those 3 local towns, for leadership in those 3 local towns. So what I've done in my past, the hard work that I put in, I think has been clear. I have always developed very strong working relationships in my past and been able to leverage those relationships to help make progress. And that's what I will do in this position. When I go up to the State House, I will not be focused on big issues, whether it's national issues or changing the way everything happens in the state. What I care about are our 3 towns and the things that matter, the water infrastructure. When I talk to Dave Taylor and talking about the needs that he has in Rockland and taking care of the sewer infrastructure beneath the roads. When I talk to people in Hanover about the water challenges there and talking about the fireworks site, those are some of the issues that I'm dealing with. I see my time's up, but again, I'm going to be focused on local issues.
Thank you, Mr. Dockter. Representative DeCoste, same question.
Well,
Why are you the best person for the position?
I agree with Emmanuel in terms of focusing on local issues. And I too have run a small business and I continue to run small business. As a matter of fact, I was a recipient and worked with my family's small business. And while I was in the Army for 22 years, I had a sub-S corporation, a number of them, working with them and maintain a number of realty trusts now. But I can tell you that there are a number of things things do become political. And as Emmanuel pointed out, it's important that you build up relationships. We have a $1.5 billion, $1 million set aside in a $1 billion bond bill. And it's going to be important that when that gets passed, and working with Senator Brady, I'm sure it will be, that someone's able to advocate for that. And I'll be able to sit down with the governor, and it is the administration who will release that money, and advocate specifically for the release of that money. And as I have done specifically with the governor before, advise him of the tough circumstances in the area of the Route 139 and the Hanover Library. You basically have an 1820 design for 2020 traffic. But as everyone alludes, it's important to work as a team. And you know, I'm proud to say that I was able to work with, among others, Representative Farley Beauvoir, who is the head of the Progressive Caucus in the House of Representatives, and we passed foster care legislation. I've teamed up with Jim Hawkins and Karma Gentile, both more liberal Democrats, for senior tax relief, and we're going to move forward on that. We're getting a rape survivor bill with Colleen Gary from Draycott, another Democrat. Jim Robinson from Wilmington, we're working on a host of police issues. So we are able to work together with Democrats and Republicans to get positive things done. Great. And I've had a record of that, and we'll continue to do it.
Great. Thank you, Rep. DeCoste. Jack Wood, next question.
Just a point of order. For the time frame on the response, should there be more time allotted for Mr. Dockter?
I have no problem with that. Go right ahead.
Yeah, if you like 30 seconds. I mean, we've been very liberal. I think they've both been given equal, pretty equal time. But yeah, we'll another 30 seconds to elaborate further.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Representative DeCoste, and I think that we've done a pretty good job here compared to some of the national debates that have happened. Appreciate the moderation. You know, Dave, one thing that I will point out is I think that relationships are important. I will point out the MassWorks grant application that happened last year over at the Hanover Mall, and that was going to benefit both Hanover and Norwell. I was very disappointed that you were the only Republican rep that was not able to get your MassWorks grant application approved. And I know that you often say that you're a Republican, the governor's a Republican, you have close ties and a close relationship. I was concerned about that, and I'd like to see that close relationship actually turn into something for the town.
Yep, if you want 15 seconds.
I will be very brief. As was explained, as a matter of fact, with Joe Colangelo and of course John Tusick, who was there as the chair, who endorsed me this just a few hours ago, and I'm grateful for that. That was simply laid out as a program and a grant that did not meet the if not but for criteria. In other words, they deemed that this could not would be able to move forward without the grant. Every single other grant was dependent on that. And that was the explanation there. And I think anyone who has taken a look at it understands that.
Okay. Okay. Jack Ward, next question.
Okay, for Mr. DeCoste?
Yes.
What are the sources of funds that are being utilized for your campaign?
Oh, a great deal of probably local funds. I'd have to look through it because we've had a number of funds, but local, and you know, also, you know, individuals. I've certainly have a great support among the business community. I've been an advocate for housing industry and the real affordable housing industry, and we've been able to work with people locally. So I would say, I'd have to break it down, but locally, I would say most of our money is still coming from within the 3 towns.
Okay, thank you, Mr. DeCoste. I'll read it again for Mr. Dockter. What are the sources of funds that you're being utilized for your campaign?
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Actually, we had a WATD forum, and this question came up as well, and I wasn't really expecting it. So I did go back and look at the funds, Dave, that both of us have received, and the donations. I'm very proud of the support in district that I've received. I know that in district, I've received over twice the amount of individual donors, not businesses in district. I'm very proud of that. And I'm also very proud of the higher number of contributions and amounts in district. In addition to the in-district contributions, which is for use at home, individuals just like you who are coming out mostly in small amounts to support my candidacy. I very much appreciate that. I've also been endorsed by a number of groups, and that includes Mass Nurses Association, Mass AFL-CIO, Mass Coalition of Police, all 3 teachers unions in the 3 towns. And from many of those endorsers, they've also provided financial contributions to the campaign, which I appreciate. And I did go through also and see the self-funding that we both have done, Dave, and I've self-funded, and I appreciate that you've also self-funded higher amounts than I have. But you know, a campaign like this, I think it's important to be invested. It's an important campaign, and I think that we need the best representation possible in our district.
Thank you, Mr. Dockter.
Thank you. Okay. Next question. So you both were former selectmen. What would you say was one of your highlights or accomplishments from your time serving locally on your respective boards of selectmen? We'll start with you, Mr. Dockter.
Thanks, Jared. You know, I would say that my proudest accomplishment is the most recent this year during COVID. We faced significant expected layoffs, significant layoffs in town. In fact, numerous of our teachers received pink slips, actually. We were able to turn that around. I fought very hard on the Board of Selectmen, both publicly in public meetings and also privately behind closed doors, working relationships in town to try to make sure that we were able to have the funding there to avoid those layoffs. And I'm very proud that in Hanover we were able to recall almost all of those who were affected by that. I'd say that making sure we did not have layoffs for our teachers, our police, our firefighters, our DPW directors, that's what I'm proudest about. Over the course of my time on the Board of Selectmen, what I'm proud about is my transparency. If you speak with anyone in Hanover about my time on the Board of Selectmen, what they say is that I was very involved. I was very public. Before I got in the Board of Selectmen, it was very difficult to find out who was doing what, when something was happening. And I know, Dave, that you've thanked me for this, to be very transparent. I appreciate that. I will bring that effort to the State House. It's difficult to know what any state rep is doing. So if you go and you try to find out what some state rep is doing, it's very hard. What I plan to do as state rep is make sure that I do a monthly newsletter and then ongoing updates through social media and other ways to make sure people know what they're doing and how they can be involved. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Dockter. Representative DeCoste, same question.
Well, you asked about what I was proud about, most proud of. We had a couple of very good years when I was selectman. I would tell you that working with my peers, I guess what I'm most proud about was, number one, the fact that we kept government fairly limited, and we did not have any need for tax increases or overrides while I was a selectman. And I'm very proud of that. Other things we did was to expand smaller programs, senior citizens tax relief, for instance. I have been a champion of the senior circuit breaker as a state representative, and as a selectman, I also was very focused on making sure that as many of our seniors understood that. And there were some other things having to do with veterans that I think we scored some great improvements on. We finally got our veterans agent fixed, and apart from Hanover, and that allowed also Hanover to have their own veterans agent. So there were some things in both in senior tax relief, taxes overall, business movement into Norwell, and overall, I would say government efficiency. And I would agree. The reason I did recognize Emmanuel, because I was in Norwell facing the same challenges, let's say, to get minutes approved, updated, and to make sure that people knew, for instance, when there were board memberships open. So I see my time is up, but I think Emmanuel and I can agree that the need for transparency.
Very good. Thank you, Representative DeCoste. Mr. Ward, I believe we're at our last question.
This is the last question, and it will be to Mr. DeCoste. Should Massachusetts support a legal change limiting election spending and establishing that corporations do not have the same rights as humans?
Say that once again, please. That did not come through too well.
Really? Okay, I'm sorry. So, Mr. DeCoste, the question is, should Massachusetts support a legal change limiting election spending and establishing that corporations do not have the same rights as humans?
Well, you've asked kind of two questions there. I think you're talking about Citizens United in general, and also limiting the ability for individuals. And I think that would Was it Buckley versus Vallejo? I think that basically would be illegal for us to limit it. You know, campaign contributions to free speech. So the best we could do along those lines would be to somehow publicly maybe subsidize candidates who agreed not to take private contributions. But I think that public contributions, you know, again, they would basically compel all of us to support potentially candidates we didn't agree with. So I won't, you know, talk about Citizens United. And I know you that kind of dabbles in what you're asking, but generally I do not support public contributions towards any candidates. I think the system we have is fair. One thing I will say though, is that we have made a great stride in terms of recognizing individuals as soon as they contribute. And the OCPF should be commended for that, because we do have to recognize our contributors right away.
Thank you, Mr. DeCoste.
Thank you.
Mr. Dockter, would you like me to read that again?
No, I'm okay. Thanks, Jack. You know, I learned a lot about campaign finance and contribution as part of running this this race. I think Massachusetts does a good job. We have some of the strictest campaign finance laws in the country. We also have some of the strictest transparency laws. OCPF is very easy to manage, go through. I think it's very clear who's supporting whom through OCPF. I think most of the issues are probably federal. And again, you know, I try to stay out of the federal arena too much in this area. I will say that it seems that a lot of it is, to the extent it crosses over into state, it's with super PACs. I don't think super PACs have a place in politics. I think you can have all the money in the world, but at the end of the day, it's speaking with local individuals and actually making a difference.
Thank you, Mr. Dockter. Jared.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Mr. Doctor. So we are at our closing statements. We'll reverse the order from the opening. You both will have 2 minutes, and we will start with you, Mr. Doctor, and then Representative DeCoste.
Well, thanks, Jared. Again, also thanks, Jack, David Murphy, and Representative DeCoste. Thank you as well for joining me here tonight. And thanks you for everyone who is watching this. I don't think it's being live cast right now, but whoever goes on and watches it later, thank you so much for taking your time to learn about the issues. I hope this was helpful for all of you in making your decision as to who your rep should be. You know, one of the challenges I see in speaking with a lot of our neighbors in our district is that they don't know what a state rep does. They don't know who their state rep is. And that's something I'm trying to change. In Rockland, Hanover, and Norwell, I feel like our neighbors have 2 candidates. And while there are some similarities with both of us being in the military, I think, and both of us having been selectmen, we also have very different approaches to this position and approaches to government. You know, I'm running for state rep, as I pointed out, because I think that political partisanship is just tearing this country apart, completely tearing it apart. I think that if someone goes up there as a rep, takes extreme positions on issues, it makes it difficult to develop those relationships, to be able to work together, to actually bring back what funding and resources we need here. Now, I'm a Marine Corps vet. When I was involved in Hanover from my kids' school to serving as a selectman, those were nonpartisan positions, and we got work done. That reminds me every day, we need to stop focusing on left and right, Republican and Democrat. We need to just start focusing on right and wrong, actually getting things done. I have the experience, I have the desire to get things done by working together, and I share your priorities for the towns we love so much at home. I respectfully ask for your vote, whether it's on November 3rd or before then through early voting. And if you have any questions at all about my view on issues, why I'm running, or how I can help you, please reach out. All my contact information is on my website at votedockter.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Doctor. Representative DeCoste.
Okay, well, thank you. Emmanuel, thank you. I think we did a lot better than our peers at the national level anyway, so I appreciate that. Jack, Jared, Dave Murphy, and all of the Democrat Town Committee and Republican Town Committee of Rockland, thank you very much for sponsoring this. I will echo the concerns of my opponent in many ways regarding the discourse and the lack of discourse at the national level. I think we can do a much better job at the state And recognizing this, I have always, at the state level, made it a point to find a Democratic peer in the other party to sponsor every major piece of legislation that I have filed. We always either have a co-presenter, and along with that, usually a large group of folks in the other party working together, both Democrats and Republicans, to get things done. So in that respect, my opponent and I are on the same page entirely. Tonight, I'm asking the voters of Hanover, Norwell, and Rockland for the opportunity to be a representative, to work on those issues that we spoke about tonight, to work on getting the economy back on track, to support small business and larger businesses, to craft the type of local and state policies that will help them recover from COVID and move forward. My own background is in the military, and also as a local businessman since my early 20s through the time right now, which is 57, we have worked towards that end. And over the 6 years as your state representative, I've been able to work with Governor Baker and my peers in the legislature of both parties to move forward on a number of issues and to make a number of improvements, from everything from foster care towards dealing with opiate addictions and towards making Massachusetts a better place to live. So once again, I ask for your vote on November 3rd, or through early voting beginning on the 11th. And I thank you for the time tonight.
Thank you, Representative DeCoste. And again, thank you to everyone for tuning in. Well, not tuning in because we're not live, but thank you to everyone who will be viewing this program. And again, on behalf of the Rockland Republican Committee, I want to thank you, Mr. Dockter, you, Representative DeCoste, as well as my friend and colleague, Jack Ward from the Democratic Town Committee, and David Murphy at WRPS for helping us put together this forum. That's all I have, Jack.
Thank you, Jared. Gentlemen, I'd like to thank each of you, Dave DeCoste and Emmanuel Dockter, for civil discourse. And I just have one closing comment. Oh, well, I'd also repeat that thank you to Dave Murphy for getting this put together for us. We are in the middle of a serious pandemic. Over 210,000 Americans are dead, and that number is still rising. Over 9,000 residents of the Commonwealth have died from the virus. Every day, 800 to 1,000 Americans are dying from COVID-19. There are countries around the world that have contained the virus by an organized national response that includes everyone wearing a mask, frequently washing your hands, social distancing, staying out of crowds. You may be satisfied with the way things are being run, or you may not be satisfied with the way things are being run. As Americans, the most important thing you can do about it is vote. You can vote by mail. You can vote early. You can vote on Tuesday, November 3rd. So wear your mask and vote. Remember, we are all Americans. We are the United States of America. Make sure you vote. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Good night, everyone.